This show is strictly for educational purposes. The opinions expressed on the show are personal to the individuals appearing in the show and not those of Thinking Tree Ecoholics Private Limited. The show is not intended to offend or defame any individual, entity, caste, community, race, or religion, or to denigrate any institution, person, living or dead. Listener discretion is strongly advised. So, hello and welcome to the Thinking Tree series powered by Ecoholics. We have with us today Mr. Dhruv Sharma, who's the former Additional Private Secretary to the Union Minister. He's also a public policy expert. So, sir, talking about public policy, there have been many policies that have rolled out since independence, and they were with great intention. The only problem that lay was in their execution. Do you think that more emphasis should be laid on the existing policies in the implementation of the existing policy rather than rolling out new ones every couple of years?
So that's a very interesting question. And to simply answer it, I'll just elaborate a little. Now, if you look at any major revolution that has happened in the country and you think about the person responsible for it, you can think about Green Revolution, you can think about White Revolution, the entire dependence on UIDAI. All of this was brought in by somebody who was a lateral entry. You know, and when I say this, I'm not saying that the current bureaucracy in the country is not effective or is not efficient. They are effective in their own sense. But we are talking about a nation which is one of the fastest growing economy. Our demographic dividend, you look at any pointer, if you map India with other developing countries, we are moving at a much faster rate. Our requirements are also moving at a much faster rate. Now, if you need to bring in policies that work for the new India, you need to infuse professionals in the entire system. To give you another heads up for this, for example, I am a lateral entry, right? And I can call myself an expert of say public policy, though I am also learning. The only thing where I feel I bring in a value add is the fact that I can bring in one or couple of innovative ideas. There is, I have grown up in the country. My way of looking at things versus somebody else's way of looking at things, there's a big difference. So to put perspective to your question, if you ask me, is there a need to introduce more policies? I think no. We have a very sound structure for proposing policies. The issue is with implementation. And my basic premise right now, and when I share this with you, is I think currently in the system, the flaw where I feel we can do a very basic tweak is to bring in professionals. I'll just share a very simple example with you. For example, if you talk of representatives, it is only today, or maybe it started in around 2007, 2008, that professionals or representatives, which could be member parliaments, member legislative assemblies, or your basic corporators at the corporation level, they realized that as a representative, there is so much that they have to do. They have to be aware of what's happening in the country, in the world. They need to be aware of various talks of life. For example, what is happening in the economy, what is his citizen in the constituency asking for. There are so many different aspects of his day-to-day work. The representatives realize that okay, we need professionals coming in. We need professional assistance. That's where I started my journey. I was a legislative aide, or maybe research assistant to MPs to begin with. So my simple point and my simple premise is that to bring in more effectiveness, we need to bring in professionals. I'll just share another example with you. If you look at the Western economy or the Western countries to begin with, during Mr. Obama's campaign, when he became president and when he came into power, there were some 2,000, 3,000 professionals who joined with him. So my point here is that when you bring in new talent, when you bring in young professionals, when you bring in domain experts, that is where change will happen. So if I give you a little another perspective of this, for example, we have general elections coming in every 5 years. Uh, if we assume that one party stays for 5 years and there's a new prime minister which comes in the next 5 years, you look at the change. There will only be maybe 4 or 5 people at the top bureaucratic level who'll change. Rest structure remains the same. We will transfer one senior, very senior respected IAS from one division to the other, or we will shuffle within. However, the aspect of bringing actual professional advice, actual domain advice, domain expertise, that can only be brought if you bring in professionals. So, if I put it simply, there is a very, very urgent need to bring in professionals and domain experts from various domains. Now, I'll just give you a simple example. You would have read about this entire public, the lateral entry that the country started, and they did hire 10 people, and I think that's a very good move. And this is where I feel that the government is hitting all the right chords, because that move in itself, and when I look at it, while being a part of a very small part of the policy system, I think that's a very, very progressive move, and you will see a lot of change happening in the next 5 years to come. Second, to answer your question, you know, uh, I think Indians, and I am also a part of the group. We really want change very fast. So it's like, if you look at how things have progressed in the last, I would say, 7 8 years, starting with 2014, there was a thinking that change will happen suddenly. Somebody has come in into power and things will really become great. It doesn't work like that. There are so many challenges. So the second thing I want to put it is that there has to be a long term plan. That's one. Irrespective of whatever party is in power, if you think of an infrastructure reform to begin with, it has to be thought through for the next 15 years, 20 years. You cannot limit yourself to 5 years or to 10 years or to specific number of years, that okay, we will reap in some benefit and then we'll figure it out again later. I think that is something which was missing, which I feel, as an outsider now, that has really improved. We do look at ministries coming out with plans for the next 10 years, for the next 15 years. That's a very, very, very great aspect coming in. The third point to your question, I would say that for, again, to implement or to effectively implement a policy, there is a need of feedback. Now, this is something that I have realized in the last years of, I started my first campaign, or my first real ground experience was in Bihar. Now, to be very honest, we devise policies for the citizens. Now, if you just think of it for a second, and it'll be, you'll realize what the point I'm trying to make. If a policy, if I am a stakeholder of the policy, and if feedback comes from me, from the ground, it's not just bottom down, it's down up also. You imagine the kind of nuances, the kind of tweaks you can do. So just devising a great policy on book is 50% or maybe 40% of the job done. The actual work is implementation, and I feel if there's a feedback system that is devised, that okay, let's talk to one of our stakeholders, let's talk to groups of our stakeholders, let's understand what is their feedback to it. Have they liked it? If they've liked it, which part of the policy, or what is it that they liked? And if they haven't liked something, if they face some challenges, what is it that they face and how can we tweak it? So I think that is something very important. We talk about checks and balances, we talk about transparency. I think that is something that should be given for a policy. I mean, a basic thing like transparency should not be a requirement anymore. Checks and balances should not be a requirement of a policy for India in the 21st century right now. What we need now is to move ahead from all those basic requirements and come to a point where we say, okay, let us have a 3 monthly or a 6 monthly feedback system. Let us see what's going wrong. Let us take some feedback. And if there is something going wrong, let us accept it and let us move forward, taking those recommendations and tweaking the policy. So, you would also, I mean, wherever you come from, you would also notice that if, for example, there was a flyover that was needed in your city. For example, I come from Chandigarh. There was a big debate about one area where they felt that there was a flyover needed because there were a lot of traffic jams were happening. There was becoming a bottleneck. Now, if you make a flyover, just a simple example, by the time you make it, it'll be 3 4 5 years would pass. When the flyover is ready, I can assure you, your traffic would have increased by almost that much amount of margin which you would have taken when you started building the project. So I just give you a hypothetical example. In Delhi, if you go every 6 months or 3 months, you'll see some new road that has opened up, some new flyover or some turn that has come up. But if you see the real-time situation of traffic, it's neither the same. It would have actually gone worse. The problem with that is we are not thinking about the requirement 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line. And this is where I feel when I come into my first point, the moment we bring professionals, the moment we bring domain experts who can do a trend analysis, who can understand that, okay, we are at a point A and we would be at a point B once we deliver the project. Let us take that into consideration. Let us add that also and then see holistically that maybe that flyover there could be a tweak to another road ahead. We could maybe have a cut again. We could start from maybe a kilometer before. We can look at other cities, how are they building up, and then plan. So, to simply put, yes, we have some real good policies on paper and even some really good policy which are working wonders right now. But I think if we work systematically on these three or four things, you'll see a very, very, very effective implementation on ground.
So, to sum up your answer, what we need to do is we need to bring in lateral entries and then we need to have a feedback and some other things, and that is how implementation can be improved and the existing policies can work better. And rolling out new ones probably might not be required. That's fair enough. So, sir, we've
So to
observed
to maybe
that.
to maybe add to that, or maybe to sum it up in a different way, I would say the current system is nice. If you want to improve it, you'll have to do tweaks to it. So lateral entry or bringing professional domain experts is one aspect of it. Understanding your requirements and planning ahead. By ahead, I do not mean by a year ahead. By really looking at 5 years, 10 years requirement is second. And third, to develop a feedback system. So I think these 3 points could sum that up.
That's really going to help. That's fair enough. So when we talk about policies, a majority of them are actually aimed at the lesser privileged people in India. One of those being the public delivery system, which is doing some great work. But what, according to you, can be some reforms that can make it even better?
So again, now when you look at public distribution system, we need to understand that has evolved over time. It started from 1960s, if I'm not wrong. The concept got evolved a little in 1992. There were some additions to it in 1997. Then the entire 2013 Act came in, and the PDS system we have right now. I'll just spend a minute in understanding what exactly is it. So it's basically a combination of central and state government's effort, wherein the central government has been given the responsibility of getting the food grains and not or non-food grains delivered to the marginalized section at a very discounted price, while the state government handles all the other issues of, for example, who will be a beneficiary, identifying them, issuing ration cards and all of that. If you study this system a little more, you need to understand that in India, the subset is huge. And there will be challenges, like the challenges that we've faced over years. There'll be challenges in terms of pilferage. There'll be challenges in terms of unidentified people coming in, taking in on behalf of somebody else. There'll be challenges in terms of corruption. There'll be challenges in terms of food going bad or accountability, all of that. But to understand the real-time challenge, I'll just draw your attention into a few aspects of it. Number one is that let's understand that if you take into consideration the 2011 census data, we were at somewhere around 125 crore, 120 crore population. And if I look at that, I think the PDS system, if I'm not wrong, takes into consideration about 80 crore beneficiaries as a matter of fact on the whole. Now let's understand, we're in 2020 as of now. The population, if I can give a fair estimate, would not be less than about 135, 137 crores. Now, if you take that same 67% number of beneficiary, we are now sitting at something around 92 crore plus. Now, let me give you another understanding of it. If you look at people who've got left out, There's a large chunk of people who got left out, and let's accept it. And I feel it starts from, as I mentioned in the earlier question also, when you start believing in a policy, when you start asking for feedback, the basic trait that I'm trying to explain is that you become a part of it and you realize that okay, if there is something going on, let's accept it. So just to add to that, I sense that somewhere around 3.5 crore people from UP and about 2 to 2.2 2.3 crore people from Bihar have got left out. So that's a very, very, very big number. Now let's come to the other aspect of it. While we are talking about the fact that okay, the public distribution system has got evolved and it really is a very advantageous system for the country, we have not been able to get the states and the center at a similar level. For example, if you look at the additions that have been made to the public distribution system in certain states, you would see that Chhattisgarh, for example, or Haryana, for example, or some other state, for example, has tweaked its delivery system in a way. For example, I've just reading about the fact that in Haryana and I think in Chhattisgarh also, they have done an online system for ration cards, which is an addition that they've done. I think Punjab has added ghee also in the list of commodities that they deliver from the fair price shops. All of that has happened. But what the point I'm trying to make is that the central government has frozen the number of beneficiaries that you can add. So, for example, today, if a state accepts that, okay, I have an X number of beneficiaries that I should add to the list of the number, the center has frozen it. He cannot add it. So, there, while you have privilege, while you have issues of maybe wastage happening or issues of leakages happening in the system, and they're huge here, you are not in a position to add maybe genuine few more additional beneficiaries. That's one. And the fact that in the recent budget, the Honorable Prime Minister has announced the integrated management of PDS, which will be which will be like a portable ration card that you can bring in, one nation, one ration card. I think that's a very progressive step. The second thing is digitization, and as we've been mentioning about the fact that while we are moving towards direct benefit transfers and all of that, digitization is going to really help the system a lot. And I think about 23 crore ration cards have got digitized. They have also been seeded with Aadhaar. I think 56% of them have got seeded with Aadhaar. That will be a very, very, very important step. And as mentioned earlier, this new PD system that the honorable finance minister mentioned, which they are hoping will roll on from the next year, 2021, I feel that will be a major breakthrough. It's like, for example, a migrant laborer who was from Bihar comes to Delhi, is working in Delhi. He will not have to make a new card, go into that entire ruckus again. He will be assigned a card which he can show in Delhi and get the same stock that he is promised. So I think these things and the way the country is moving towards digital direct benefit transfer that I mentioned, that is the way to go. And I think that's a very firm step to begin with. The second thing I feel is that we need to now understand that the states and the center, they need to have a better coordination in terms of implementation, in terms of all these actual issues that come on ground. If a particular state is in a position to bring in a good governance reform in the system, I think that should be studied by other states and they should follow. And I think this should be looked as a systematic approach on the whole. So, and I feel that the way we are moving towards digitization, all of that, that will really help this system to deliver the max that it can and the way it is promised to the people.
So, sir, in the last two questions, as you had mentioned, that bringing in lateral entries and bringing in better professionals is really going to help India's public policy. Behavioral economics as a branch has shown some real promise with respect to helping the public policy of India. That was apparent in the research done by Mr. Abhijit Banerjee. Also, some of the schemes in India, like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, or Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, have been proved successful because of their behavioral aspect. Do you think behavioral economics can help in bringing in more private investment in India?
That's again a very interesting concept. And I was studying economics. I've done economics in bachelor's and master's both. I was always very interested in this entire concept. And to think about it, when you look at India, we as a country are so, how do I say, influenced by social norms and behavioral aspects. This is something that can generally create wonders if applied correctly. And to actually add to that, I think people would know that in 2019, the economic survey that had come in, they did include this concept of behavioral economics. I think that time the concept that they included was Nobel laureate Richard Thaler, and if I'm not wrong, and this was introduced. So it's like, for example, the schemes you've mentioned. If I change the name of Swachh Bharat to Sundar Bharat, it's just a simple change, but Sundar Bharat connects with the people in a much better way. If I change the name from Beti Bachao Beti Padhao to Beti Apni Dhan Lakshmi and Vijay Lakshmi, they it sounds better, it can connect better. If I change the name of the subsidy scheme to Think About Subsidy, so it's just that by tweaking a few things which we think are attributes that can impact the decision of the end user, we can bring in a very important change. To actually give you an example of that, I was reading about Singapore, the way they do it. For example, in a bill that the Singapore government delivers to the resident, they also give an average consumption of the locality. So in a
Hmm.
way, they are telling you that, boss, if your bill is more than the average, you watch out. If it is less, then good, you're doing a good job. So it in a way is a very simple thing, but the end user gets a very important message that, okay, I think I should look at this aspect of it. So to put this simply, I feel behavioral economics, especially in India, could be a real game changer. And bringing in to the question of bringing in private investment, I think in general, if you improve your house in order, everything else will catch up. So I think not only just private investment, it will also induce your domestic investments. And to further elaborate on that, I feel right now where we are looking at the COVID-19 situation and all of this, while a message has been clearly delivered to the world and India being a part of it, that things are not going to be the same, don't take everything for granted. I think you will see a mild aspect of one of the benefits of this coming in when you understand and map the behavior of the customer or the citizen. And I do sense that people have become more responsible in general, and that's a very good thing. And I think this is the right time to maybe further ponder and implement behavioral aspect, think about it and implement it on ground, because this is the right time. People have they are in that mindset of changing their thought, the way they do stuff. And I think this is where, if induced properly, this could really transform us in the next 5-10 years to come. So yes, behavioral economics and the impact, especially in India, could bring wonders, especially at this time. And I think if as I mentioned in 2019, the government did think about this, but I think now is the time where again professional domain experts who've studied this should come up with a detailed plan. And I think if they do, and if it's implemented, it's going to create wonders.
Thank you, sir. That was really, I believe, if people watch this interview and think about, it's really going to help. If all of these are implemented, it's really going to create a major change. Coming to the current situation, we are in the midst of a pandemic right now, which is a very, very weird situation the world is going through right now. So, a lot of the policies that have been running for decades now have been put on hold. The funds that were put into those schemes have been put on hold, and the to generate excess fund to fight the pandemic. So, what are the checks and balances that we can learn from this pandemic to make our policies pandemic proof in future?
So that's again a very interesting question. Now, the way I look at it, let's come to the pandemic first. Now, if you ask any expert, again, who's a health expert or who can give you a better understanding about a global pandemic, he would give you an opinion that it's too early. Like, even if I tell you that it's just been 3-4 months right now, that the world's actually seen started seeing the worst of it. It's too early again to ascertain or to understand or to give comments. But to answer to your question, I think if you look at India as a matter of fact, and as again as an outsider right now, I do feel that we were always under the curve. We were not in a position at any point in the last 2 months, 3 months, where we could actually generate confidence among the citizens that okay, we are in a good position. We'll see what happens. Though we kept saying the same thing, but I think India, especially in the Asian countries, the kind of expectation that people had, it's lived up to it somewhere. But I think yes, you're right that this has really upsetted the system down. And there is one more thing that in all these years I've understood that you can promise 1,000 things, you can promise tasks to the citizens, all of that can happen. You can bring in new policies, as you mentioned. You can implement them also. You can implement few. The actual strength of your policy of your system is exposed when such a thing happens. And I'm assuming that such a thing happens once in a century or maybe once in 150 years. This is where the real test is. And let me tell you, I do not see any country. I'm not going to name any country, but I'm not saying that there is no country today who can say, thumping its chest, that you know what, we were able to sort it out. They were not. You can look at the developed countries. I am very impressed personally with the way Germany handled it, and also the way Germany is handling its economy. I'm very impressed with it. That are the qualities of actually how a developed country should look at such a pandemic. So when you look at all of this, I feel even countries like Singapore were able to contain it initially, but now if you look at the numbers, I mean, it's about 500, 600 cases every day, even after their lockdown has ended a couple of days back. So, to be very honest and to cut it short, any, not, not even one of the, how do I say, ideal developed countries. If you can give an example of were they able to solve it properly, 100%, no. Let's come to India. Let's come back to India again. While we are exposed to all of this, we are exposed to the health conditions that we are providing our citizens. And let me tell you, it's not that we were waiting for a pandemic. We did know that this was not as good as it should have been, but we kept brushing it under the carpet. Okay, fine, we'll think about it. Let's look at insurance. Okay, I live in a city. We all take care of ourselves. Like any responsible citizen, I have an insurance policy and I take care of my family and my close ones. That okay, in an unfortunate situation, we have the best facility available, and similarly, people who can do it. While the government started the real big scheme, the healthcare scheme that the government brought, all of this was happening. But we need to understand one thing, that we never worked on our infrastructure. And that's something that, I'm not going to blame the recent government or the previous government or the previous to previous government. I think, unfortunately, my generation has been given this liability. And this is not something which is 10, 20. This has been going on since years. If you actually, this is a very serious issue. If you look at infrastructure development in the nation, you'll see that majority of them were gifted to us by Britishers. The railways, the postal network, all of that. We have not been able to capitalize or act as a catalyst to our existing ones and develop new. And this is where healthcare also came in. You'll be amazed that there are stories coming out from certain states that people are paying lakhs and lakhs of money to reserve a bed. So if they fall of if in an unfortunate situation, they've already booked it. I'm not saying, that's just a simple example. What I'm trying to tell you is it has exposed our lack of infrastructure. And data suggests that there is for example, 80,000 beds to one, or maybe some thousand have just some few doctors. Those could be hard data, and I will not go 100% by that data also, because I think if you look at situation in states like Bihar, in states like UP, because of the density of the population, I mean, it is serious. So to be very honest, I think the national disaster management, was set up keeping something of this sort in mind. But I think going forward, we need to figure out and keep a limited corpus of maybe 1%, 2% every year in our budget for something like this to happen. And trust me, this might sound a little funny, but if you do keep a very small aspect of your budget for something of this sort, you'll be amazed in 100 years or in 150 years. God forbid if it happens again, you will be amazed with the kind of money you already have stored. You know, and I think that's one very important step that we can take right now. That we should leave a very limited corpus of our funds every year from a budget to something of this sort. Second would be to, yes, again I come to the same point. I feel the developed countries who were able to still control it, the basic reason, and I think that's again available in the open domain, is that they relied on expert opinion. Unfortunately in India, uh, I get a call from my father saying that some ex Baba is coming online and he said, okay, you drink this and COVID will not harm you. My problem, I have no problems with that. My problem is we did not rely on actually communicating professional opinion or taking professional opinion from people and then certifying stuff. Or for and I don't actually blame the government for that also, because yes, again, it's a global phenomena. Even the countries who thought they've thought through this, for example, the mask. About, I think, a month and a half back, masks were only essentials for people who were in the line of fire, who were COVID warriors, who were working. But as and when data came in, they realized that, okay, no, you know what, let's use masks for people around us, because that's one of the safest way of stopping the spread. So what I'm trying to tell you is, professional opinion, yes, it matters a lot, and especially for a case like this, it does. Second, to understand that this happens in regular intervals, why not save a few bucks every year and prepare for it, rather than taking a knee-jerk reaction? Okay, let's stop all of this, let's stop this one, let's stop this one, and let's start another care fund, and then let's see what happens. So I think that is a very important step that you can take in. The second point, and I'll be very quick with this, is the way the states have handled it. Uh, I feel that while one state could be worse off because of a number of variables or number of factors, this should have been a test case scenarios for all state governments also, to come together, understand what has worked, what has not worked, and start implementing it. I think there was a lot of reliance on the central government and vice versa, that there was not. This is what I feel, again, being a citizen, that I was thinking that there'll be some new idea that might come in, there'll be something that we'll talk, but that didn't happen. And I feel, going forward, we need to put the best brains of the country and think about the situation this could happen again, and maybe prepare ourselves much better in terms of knowledge, in terms of resources, in terms of data, in terms of the ability to bring in treatment. And I feel, going forward, this should be handled in a much better way.
So very precisely, sir, you've put an answer to all my questions. Like, there are very basic steps that can be taken in India, and all these situations can be handled much better than they are being handled right now. So that was, some insightful, some insightful things that we got to know from you. Would you like to share, like, would you like to say something apart from my questions you'd like to share with our viewers?
Honestly speaking, there was something that uh, a lot of people ask me, why am I in this field? It's a very unorganized field. You know, the only thing that I want to tell your viewers is that while economics is one of the best subjects that I've also studied, and you could have thought that, okay, there are 5 avenues, 6 avenues of what you can do, but if you really want to make an impact, or if you want to do something great, I think if you just uh, bring your expertise in a field, in a subject, and really work hard, there are endless opportunities. For example, I had no idea what I would be doing 5 years down the line, and I really like the work that I'm doing today. But if you would have asked me 7, 8 years prior to this, I would have said something really different. So I think as times are changing, to your students, to your viewers, uh, you should just focus on gathering as much knowledge as you can, work hard, and then leave the rest about it. There are abundant opportunities. There are various opportunities available to you. And if you're the best in your field, or if you're proving, or if you're working towards it, I think the sky is the limit.
So, sir, any final words of encouragement for ecoholics?
So again, I'll share a very interesting story about myself. I come from Chandigarh, as I mentioned earlier, and during my bachelor's, I wanted to. One of my professors called me and said, you seem to be in the right space. Why don't you go and try your masters from Delhi? And I said, okay. So I went and I started searching that there was a Delhi School of Economics. There was a lot of options in Delhi, and I was looking forward to a guidance, to a mentorship. That okay, I might know 2 out of 10 things, and I do not know 8. So I need somebody who could help me. And I come from a background where maths was there, but I was not very much into mathematics. So I needed some real good guidance. Though I did get it in the end, but I think I did waste a lot of time to kind of figure the right space, the right mentor. When I heard about Ecoholics and when I had a conversation with Sanath, I was so impressed with the fact that here is a guy who's devoting his time, attention, everything on providing you with that guidance. So, think about me. While I was looking for it and I could not find it in the right time, there is somebody who's already available to you. And I think the way he's progressed, the way Ecoholics has progressed, I am very impressed. If you ask me today, an online platform where I could get end to end anything I want about economics, be it for IAS, be it for UGC NET, or be it for any other exam. If I was in a position, I would have enrolled myself for eternity. And I think I should thank Ecoholics for the kind of work they're doing. And I really wish you best of luck. And I thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Ecoholics team does put in a lot of effort to make sure the best quality content reaches our viewers, and that is our primary objective. And thank you so much. I mean, I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart because this is a especially difficult scenario of COVID, and you are extremely busy, and still you graced our show with your time, and you shared some beautiful insights with us. We just thank you so much for appearing on our show, sir. We can't thank you enough for coming.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me on the show. And it was great talking to you. And thank you once again.
Thank you, sir.